Gregg and Duane Allman's lives were never meant to follow an easy road. Long before the music, before the stages and the legend, their story began with loss. Sudden, violent, and impossible to understand. This is the story of their lives, from that moment forward to the music, the fame, and the price they would ultimately pay. This story first appeared in a newspaper just days after Christmas in 1949. The headlines read, "Army Lieutenant Robbed and Slain." On the afternoon of December 26, Lieutenant Willis Allman and a fellow officer, Robert Buchanan, crossed paths with a stranger, a hitchhiker who would change everything. The three men spent hours together, passing time over games and drinks, an ordinary encounter that gave no hint of what was to come. As the evening wore on, the hitchhiker asked for a ride to another location. At first, it seemed like a simple favor, but once inside the car, he began giving directions, guiding them farther and farther away from the lights into a dark, isolated stretch of open land. That's when everything turned. From the back seat, the hitchhiker suddenly pulled a pistol. He ordered both men out of the car. Their wallets were taken. Then, in a strange and unsettling detail, the two officers were marched deep into the darkness and told to lie face down on the ground. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Willis Allman made a desperate move, lunging for the gun. Buchanan turned and ran. As he fled toward a distant farmhouse, two gunshots shattered the silence. When Buchanan finally returned, the attacker was gone, along with the car. Left behind, in the cold, empty field, was Lieutenant Willis Allman, dead at age 31 from a single gunshot wound to the chest. He left behind a wife and two small boys who would grow up without a father, leaning on their mother and each other to find their way. Years later, those boys would step onto a stage and change music forever, leaving a musical legacy that would forever change the sound and power of live rock and roll. Duane Allman was 3 years old at the time of his father's death. His baby brother Gregg was 2. A few years after his death, their mother, Geraldine, decided to go back to school to study to become a CPA. She decided to send her boys off to Castle Heights Military Academy in Lebanon, Tennessee, which of course they both did not enjoy at all. After finishing her schooling, she moved herself and the two boys to Daytona Beach, Florida. Duane was 11 years old by this time, and both him and his brother Gregg could not have been happier. After moving to Florida, Gregg, not Duane, became interested in guitars. Duane's fancy at that time became motorcycles. Duane got himself a used 165 Harley-Davidson, and Gregg got himself a guitar. This was around the winter of 1960. Gregg said that when Duane finished riding his motorcycle, he would come in and start playing his guitar. But it looked like motorcycles and guitars were starting to cause both boys, especially Duane, some problems in school and on the streets, and his mother decided to send Duane back to the military academy, with little brother Gregg soon to follow. Around this time, Duane's passion for guitars and music took the place of motorcycles. For a time, him and some of the other guys at the academy started a band called the Misfits, but this didn't last too long, as Duane was finally kicked out of the academy. Gregg, who was sent back later, played in the Misfits also, but he finally quit the band and the school in the spring of 1964 and returned home to join Duane. After returning home, Duane and Gregg started a band called the Escorts. This band would evolve into the Allman Joys and primarily play a mix of rhythm and blues, soul, and rock covers. The band gained some regional recognition, especially for their live performances. Their repertoire included songs by artists such as James Brown, Wilson Pickett, and Otis Redding. After the Allman Joys, Gregg and Duane went on to play in various other groups, including the Hourglass, before ultimately co-founding the Allman Brothers Band. While the Allman Joys and Hourglass might not have reached the heights of fame that the Allman Brothers Band later achieved, their role in the musical journey of Duane and his brother Gregg is significant. It was a stepping stone that contributed to the development of their musical identities and set the stage for the success that would follow later. But Duane knew those bands wasn't the sound that they were looking for, so he left for a time and started doing studio work in Muscle Shoals. Gregg stayed behind in California, but when Duane got tired and bored with the session work, he went down to Jacksonville, Florida, and dropped in on his old friend, drummer Butch Trucks, and said he was ready to put a band together. That's exactly what he did. This is where Jamo, Barry Oakley, Dickie Betts, Butch, and Duane would start the Allman Brothers Band. All they needed was a singer, and Duane said there was only one singer for this group, and that was his little brother Gregg. Duane called Gregg, who was still out in California, and told him that he had the band. All they needed was him. Gregg caught a ride across country, and once there, the Allman Brothers Band was complete. His first rehearsal with the band was on March 26, 1969, and 4 days later, they played their first show. With Duane leading them, the Allman Brothers Band would become one of the greatest live acts ever. That is, until October 29, 1971. After Duane's death from a motorcycle accident, the band held a meeting on their future. Clearly, all wanted to continue, and after a short period, the band returned to the road. Drummer Butch Trucks spells it out with this statement: "We all had this thing in us, and Duane put it there. He was the teacher, and he gave something to us, his disciples, that we had to play out. But for some of the members, without Duane, music and life would never be the same again, especially for little brother Gregg." Life on the road with the Allman Brothers wasn't always easy. Drinking since he was a teen, Gregg said drugs came as second nature, and by 19 he was snorting heroin and cocaine. After the death of his brother Duane, life would drastically change for Gregg. He said he didn't start grieving Duane's death until 10 years after he was gone. He said that you can't cry while you're on cocaine, and that helped him get through the funeral. To try and get a grasp on Gregg and his personal life, between 1971 and 1981, he was married 4 times. He would go on to marry 3 more times after that. He would father 5 children, 3 with various wives and 2 with other women he had relationships with. Gregg kind of put it all in perspective by saying, "Every woman I've ever had a relationship with has loved me for who they thought I was." This makes me wonder if anyone ever really knew Gregg. His third wife, Cher, who attended his funeral, had this to say about Gregg: "A kind, loving man, and a mystery to all of us at times." After his brother Duane's death, and then a year later the death of bassist Barry Oakley, Gregg tried to keep the band going. But by 1976, the band was to break up for a time. Many believe that the drugs and alcohol and power struggles between Gregg and guitarist Dickie Betts was the cause, and really, it's anybody's guess. Gregg would go and record solo albums and start his own band and do some touring. It kept his name out there. But as the 80s rolled in and the southern country rock started slowing down in the mainstream music, Gregg would stick to his roots in the blues. I think he felt safe there because that's what was in his heart. Gregg, like most addicts, would try and get off drugs, and then his alcohol consumption would escalate. Gregg says his normal was to drink a quart of vodka a day. His low point came January 12, 1995. the night the Allman Brothers Band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, I remember watching it that night and seeing Gregg look like death warmed over and hardly able to talk. I figured it was about over for him. Willie Nelson, who inducted them, asked him before walking out there if he was all right, and he said, "Willie, I'm not all right." His acceptance speech lasted all of 20 seconds.
Thank you, folks. In honor of the greatest friend, brother, guitar player, and inspiration I've ever known, my brother Duane was always the first to face the fire. He was my greatest motivation. Thank you.
Gregg had so much he wanted to say that night, but that was all he was able to get out. This is how Gregg described it in his book. "It should have been the greatest week of my life, but instead I hit an all-time low. The Allman Brothers Band, the band my brother started, the band with our name on it, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I flat out missed it. I was physically there, but otherwise I was out of it, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I was drunk, man, just shit-faced drunk the entire time. Welcome to the story of my life." After watching the video of it a few days later, Gregg said he was appalled at himself. He said he broke down and cried like a baby and prayed. He had been to rehab 14 times. This time he says he hired a male nurse to come in who had worked at rehab and knew all about it, and just bit the bullet until the stuff was out of his system. Cleaned up and feeling better, Gregg would get the Allman Brothers Band back together. There'd be some member changes off and on, but they were still a huge draw at live performances. Gregg would write and they would record some more albums, but as time moved on, Gregg's health was deteriorating. Those hard years of drinking and drugging took its toll on him. He had had hepatitis C for many years, but now it was getting worse, with cirrhosis and soon cancer of the liver. He was to receive a liver transplant in 2010, and he would recover, but the cancer would return a few years later. Gregg would pass away at his home in Richmond Hills, Georgia, on May 27, 2017. He was 69 years old. In the history of rock and roll, there are bonds that go beyond music, friendships that feel more like destiny. Gregg Allman once said there was a deep spiritual connection between his brother Duane and bassist Berry Oakley. A connection so powerful it shaped the sound of the Allman Brothers Band, and perhaps even their fate. Duane Allman first met Berry Oakley in the late 1960s, when the pieces of the Allman Brothers Band was just beginning to come together. From the start, Duane recognized something different in Berry. He wasn't just another bass player. Berry treated the bass like a second lead guitar, fluid, melodic, almost conversational. Duane, with his badass slide guitar, found in Berry a musical partner who could anticipate his every move. It was as if the two of them were already speaking the same language without ever saying a word. On stage, their chemistry was undeniable. Duane would stretch out a solo, and Berry was right there with him, weaving in and out of the guitar lines, pushing the music higher and higher. Gregg Allman later on recalled, "There was a deep spiritual connection between Duane and Berry. They had something none of us could touch. They didn't even need to look at each other. Berry knew exactly where Duane was going. It wasn't just about playing notes. It was about a shared vision, an unspoken understanding that the music came from someplace higher and someplace spiritual." Offstage, their bond was just as intense. Duane and Berry spent endless hours riding motorcycles through Macon, Georgia, staying up late into the night, talking about life, philosophy, and fate. They both believed in living life to the fullest, chasing freedom and meaning at every turn. Friends said it was rare to see one without the other. Gregg himself described Berry as the brother Duane never had, outside of family. But when Duane Allman was killed in a motorcycle accident in October of 1971, the bond was shattered. The loss devastated the entire band, but for Barry, it was almost unbearable. Gregg later said, when Duane left, part of Barry went with him. Barry carried his grief quietly, but it weighed on him every single day. His drinking would increase, trying to ease the pain he felt. He would ride his motorcycle through the same streets where Duane had crashed, almost as if searching for his brother in spirit. And tragically, just a little over 1 year later, in November of 1972, Barry Oakley was killed in a motorcycle accident just a few blocks from the site of Duane's crash. The parallels were impossible to ignore. To the surviving members of the band, it felt like fate, almost as if Barry and Duane were destined to leave this world together, their bond too strong to be broken, even in death. Duane Allman and Barry Oakley are buried side by side at Rose Hill Cemetery in Macon, Georgia. The story of Duane Allman and Barry Oakley is not just about loss, it's about a brotherhood that transcended music. You can still hear it today in the recordings at the Fillmore East, the way Duane's guitar and Barry's bass carried on a conversation, lifting each other higher moment by moment. Their connection reminds us that some friendships are more than chance. They're spiritual, they're eternal, and through the music of the Allman Brothers Band, that bond between Duane and Barry will live forever. If you enjoyed this video, here's another one I think you might want to watch. And if you get a chance, hit the subscribe button and like the video. It helps keep classic rock music alive on this channel. Thanks for watching.